I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery, here with Nikyatu Jusu, the writer and director of Nanny, about a Senegalese woman hired as a nanny while experiencing disturbing visions. What was the initial inspiration that led you to want to tell this story?
So I took pieces of my mother's story. I'm first gen American, and my family's from Sierra Leone. And, my mother is a brilliant woman who's highly educated, but oftentimes when you come to America, you end up taking jobs that are well below your educational level and well below your aspirations to survive. And so that was the springboard. And then got to NYU grad film from undergrad and literally saw the nanny culture in the city. And so I started putting pen to paper, but I knew I didn't want to tell a straightforward drama about an African nanny. I knew I wanted mystical and fantastical and horrific elements in pursuit of the American dream.
And what did you hope that those these supernatural folklore elements would sort of do to draw out the themes that you were exploring?
I think the best uh, explorations of creatures, like I think about someone like Guillermo del Toro, the creatures and the supernatural and the spiritual become an external manifestation of the character's internal journey, ideally. And so, although people are probably not familiar with Anansi the Spider or Mami Wata, I gave just enough information for people to get the ways that they align with Aisha's internal narrative.
And how familiar were you with this folklore before going, writing this film? Was that something that you researched and learned about along the way?
I am a voracious researcher. I research to a fault. Like I never know when to. I enjoy the process so much, and you go down these different rabbit holes when you start researching. And so I did a lot of research because I knew I had the responsibility of introducing these figures in a way that people haven't seen in the American context. So with that burden, it's like you overthink the process. You don't want to misrepresent these figures because there's always going to be someone who comes out of the woodworks and says, this is completely wrong. There's always someone who is a professional, an aficionado on these things. And I wanted to avoid that. So I tried to be as aligned with truth as possible. And luckily, I work in academia, so I have access to things like JSTOR articles because these things are not mainstream. And so you really have to dig into the archives for this type of knowledge, which I did.
Were there other different spirits or creatures who you considered, including, before narrowing it down to, well, who's featured in the film?
There was one that I was thinking about, in addition to the other two, but at some point you have to cut the fat and hone in on a more streamlined story, especially with the way I storytell. There are so many themes that I explore simultaneously that I had to cut something out, and I did omit one presence.
And one of the things that I like about this sort of haunting is how morally kind of ambiguous it is. Like there's this conversation about how Anansi, for instance, isn't necessarily all good or all bad, but
Right.
is a survivor. Did that feel like it really also kind of reflected Aisha's journey throughout the film?
Yeah, I'm less interested in binaries. I think a lot of American culture and American cinema conditions us to think good, bad, like there's very little gray area. And the type of work that I gravitate to has this liminal space in between at all times. And also West African folklore is really about that gray area at all times. The supernatural, the spiritual is always interacting with realism simultaneously. The past is the present, is the future simultaneously. And these sound like abstractions, so sometimes they're really hard to convey in the cinematic form in real time. So I'm often having to rein in the abstract and figure out ways to make it more palatable for less cerebral audiences.
Of course, Anna Jope plays your leading lady, the title character, Aisha. Um, what made her right for the role, do you think, and what was it like working with her to kind of bring her to the emotional places that she goes in the film?
She's an amazing performer. She is the Daniel Kaluuya to my Jordan Peele, and I want to work with her for the rest of my career. She's gorgeous, but she's also brilliant, and we have a lot in common, in terms of our lineage and our culture and the way that we see the world. She's very committed to her craft, and I'm always on the lookout for particularly Black actresses who are being underutilized by this industry. There are a lot of them, their roles just aren't there in the ways that they're there for a Florence Pugh, for instance. So I'm often thinking of faces that I've seen that are maybe just skimming the surface of their potential, and she's one of those people.
And I know you shot this film during COVID, of course. What kind of challenges did that introduce to the production?
What challenges didn't they? So, anyone who's made a film or worked in production knows that anything that can go wrong often does. And, with the added obstacle of COVID, not only is it physically more laborious, but it becomes a test of the cohesiveness of your set because you're reliant on your crew to not get COVID, to not get shut down, particularly in Zone A, which is the zone that, if you do have a positive COVID case, could potentially shut down your entire production. And so while you can't know every single person on your own, even on your own set, and what they're doing over the weekend, or over the days off, like we had people in G&E, of course, going to karaoke here and there. And it's like, all right, guys, maybe it's low stakes for you, but for me, this is my first feature. So you really have to be cautious about the tribe that you build around your film if you have that luxury. We're getting tested every other day. You're getting emails about positive cases, and the headlines, like the subject line gives you a stroke. It's like you just see the subject of the email. It's like positive case, and it's like, was it me? Was it, someone in Zone A? So it's really stressful. It's really anxiety riddled, but also it's really difficult to direct behind a mask for 12-hour days for 27 days, which is how many days we shot in New York City at the peak of the pandemic last summer.
Do you feel like this experience now has thus prepared you kind of for anything?
Yeah, I do, honestly. I mean, that's the silver lining. I think now I feel ready to tackle with the right team, and I had the right team in Nanny, and these are people, Rena Yang, all my department heads I want to work with for the rest of my career. With the right team, I feel like I can tackle anything because it is astronomically harder to make anything in this climate.
And in addition to Anna Diop's character Aisha, there's Michelle Monaghan's character who hires her, and that character, could be, seen very, simply as kind of this antagonist, but she also has her own, struggles that she's navigating as a woman, even though she has privilege over certainly Aisha. What's it like, creating that character with Michelle Monaghan and kind of creating that nuance of kind of the spectrum of, oppression and privilege and
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, a spectrum of oppression and privilege. I, you write a script, and depending on how you cast that script, you give it to five directors, same script, it will be five different films, And so I knew that casting particularly Amy's character would make or break our story because I didn't want a caricature of white feminism. Like I wanted a nuanced depiction of what that looks like. And Michelle is just such a smart actress and a self-aware human being. And you need someone self-aware to play that white privilege. You don't want someone who's just as oblivious as the character you wrote because you get that caricature, in the performance. And so Michelle brought so much intelligence and depth and was willing to play with the text and find the subtext in the text. And so I think she and Anna just really bounced off each other in a really fun way.
And the film got off to a great start. It won the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival. I know that was virtual this year. What was it like to find out that that you were the winner of that award and get to celebrate that in whatever way you were able to?
It was surreal. I was still isolated. I think it was a time when it seemed like everybody had COVID. Sundance went virtual right after we were all planning to be there in person. They made the smart decision to go virtual for everyone's safety, but it was crushing because we made the film at a difficult time, a really alienating, lonely time, and then to not be able to celebrate the film in person, I went into even more of a deep depression after that, after like finding out the premiere would be virtual. So to win, the tears that I cried, like the little video that circulated, were tears that were so layered, for so many reasons. And it was just really gratifying and affirming. Sundance has been good to us, but also I believe in my ability. I believe fiercely in my ability, but I don't always believe in the system. And don't always believe in the industry to acknowledge my ability. But for once, I felt like I was justifiably rewarded, even though I didn't expect it. I know that sounds cocky, but it's like I'm still really sitting in gratitude and processing, the way that we started the year.
No, it's not cocky at all. It reminds me almost of actually of Aisha in the film. At a certain point, she gets much more assertive and she knows her worth and she demands what she's worth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very much like that.
There's a piece of me in every character in this film, the good and the bad.
And now you've been able to be together with your cast and crew in person to on the festival circuit as you've been promoting this film. What has that been like to kind of take the film around and show it to different audiences?
It has, I love doing this. I don't sit through the screening anymore. I'm at a point where, like, for the past 3 or 4 festivals, I stopped sitting through the screening because just intellectually, I'm too close to the material at this point. All I see is what I could have done better. But we've been traveling with the film and we've been finding our audience in real time, and people have been reacting in ways that have surpassed my expectations. So I'm still breathless. I'm still like not able to be present because everything is happening so fast. Like, we shot last summer, we killed ourselves to make the Sundance deadline to even get into the festival. We got in, and then it's been an astronomically fast, subhuman pace since prep, so I'm still processing. I'm still processing things that happened months ago. So it's hard for me to be present.
And as more and more people see the film, what do you hope that the takeaway is? When people have experienced Aisha's journey and her story, when those credits roll, what do you hope that they're thinking and feeling?
I think that films, we hear this phrase in the Sundance Labs a lot, that motion picture has the potential to be an empathy machine. And not only do I hope that people see the human beings around them with clearer eyes if they happen to be privileged, I hope that people who don't typically see themselves reflected on the screen feel seen and heard.
I'm confident that people will be seeing and hearing this film and feeling seen and heard by it.
Thank you.
I want to congratulate you on your work on the film and the success it's had so far, and knock on wood, the success it will continue to have.
Oh, you know what? I don't have wood around me, but you knock on that wood for me on my behalf. Thank
I
you.
absolutely will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.